Joining me now for another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show with the Knicks, headed down to Memphis on Saturday night to take on a Memphis team that looks very different than the last time that the Knicks played them, which unfortunately is because of some injuries that have hit Memphis recently. And we're going to talk about what to expect from this Memphis team with Daniel Greer of the Grizz 901 podcast. Daniel, welcome to the show.
What's up, man? Hey, listen, thank you for having me, as always. It's an honor usually when somebody, reaches out. And so being from a big fan base, it's even better because maybe, we're moving on to the scene in life. But no, it's great to have me on here on your show. So it's awesome, man. Thank you.
So I'll start here. This is more for the video audience than the audio listeners, because I'm staring at a Zach Randolph poster behind you. And once a Knick, always a Knick. Zach Randolph was part of a team that Isaiah Thomas put together that didn't make sense. And then the following year, D'Antoni was like, well, we got Jamal Crawford, we got Zach Randolph. Maybe this could be a thing. And 2 months into that season, everybody was traded because we were holding out for LeBron. It is interesting from my perspective as a Knicks fan that obviously goes back to the 90s and remembers those 2000s teams very well that didn't really accomplish anything. The difference in how we view Zach Randolph, and it was like this very short stay, and the royalty he seems to be in Memphis. If you want to speak to that, to the Knicks fans that just aren't aware, like how important he is to the fabric of Memphis Grizzlies fans and what they experienced in the late it's really like the early 2010s, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so Zebo is the man here. Like him and Tony Allen, the grandfather himself, they are looked at as being some of, the most important people of Memphis Grizzlies basketball ever. And that really trumps Ja Morant, even though Ja is obviously ascending onto the scene. You're talking about, Zebo and Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, and even TA. They are all like the four, like the big four here. And so that's what we look at Zebo as being the guy. He still comes back here on a consistent basis, still has a home here, and really has kind of made this his home, which has been crazy that somebody that doesn't even live here on a normal basis, but he actually being drafted or not drafted, but picked up by a team when honestly his career was going down in a bad direction, and so then come and make that, dude, it's been awesome to have him back in Memphis. So I use these as my two pillars of Memphis basketball, which you have Zach Randolph right here, and then you have the other way, Penny Hardaway, which is obviously he's with Memphis basketball now, but he grew up, in Memphis, played for University of Memphis when it was Memphis State. So these are my two pillars.
I think that's when you do word association with Penny Hardaway, like Magic obviously would be the first word, but Memphis is like a 1A as far as when you actually learn more about the league and where he's from and what you probably should associate him with the most. I'm happy to bring up some better times for the Grizzlies to start this episode, because since I reached out to you about doing this episode and doing this podcast, Ja Morant went down for the year. Marcus Smart is down for, I believe, the next 6 weeks with injuries. And like Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't play in their most recent game against the Dallas Mavericks earlier this week. So I just I like to ask how the vibes are with a team and with a fan base. I have an idea, but if I could be more specific, like compared to expectations coming into this year, knowing you were going to miss Ja for a while, and then after how last season ended, like how are the vibes in amongst the fan base with everything that's gone on this year?
So are you familiar with the many stages of grief?
Yes.
Well, that's exactly where
we're
we are.
going through it today. Okay. Therapy session it is. Let's do it.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we are. Like, you're the off season, it doesn't, the last year didn't go the way it wanted to. Right. So the vibes going into this year is, Steve-O should be coming back, but then the off season you have Ja do stupid things, and then he's suspended for the first 25 games. So you're kind of like, I think we'll be okay. We just got to survive the storm of the 25 games. So you're okay, feeling good into the season. We're championship contenders, getting Steve-O back, Steven Adams, that is. And so finally, you come out to the preseason and Steven Adams gets hurt. You're already down Ja. This team is just completely just on a whole nother level of just being wrecked and marred with injuries. And so at that point, you're like, can we just survive? Can we get through this? And it was a chemistry issue early on, trying to figure out who's going to handle the ball, what you're going to do. And we still have that issue today. But the fact that this season has just been completely a wreck. We're finally now, and I know that, we'll get into more expectation stuff, but we're finally into the point as Grizzlies fans, probably the team as well. We know who we are. Like, we're not going to be a playoff team, no matter how well we play. We would have to, I think it's 27-19 the rest of the way just to be 500. I think that's the number. That's not possible. Not with Marcus Smart now being hurt. And so I think I think it's no expectations going forward, which actually allows you a little bit of weight off your back, because the other times you're fighting. You're like, please just win a game so we can somehow get to 6-19 the first 25. That's where we were.
So the fascinating thing about what you're telling me as far as the expectations just kind of disappearing is that, like, I've talked to some podcasters and people that are close with the team, of like the Pistons and the Hornets and some teams that are legitimately going nowhere this year, except the very beginning of the lottery. And the interesting place where the Grizzlies find themselves, as far as I'm concerned, is like, this is a team 2 years ago that who knows how that, I'm sure I don't have to tell you, who knows how that series against the Warriors plays out if Ja doesn't get hurt. And, last year with, obviously Ja had his off the court issues, but that was still a 2 seed that just ran into this Lakers team that, was playing great ball. So there's no like very clear pivot point of like fire sale, get rid of everybody and rebuild it. It's very much like a stopgap year, where you're going to take the draft pick when it comes. I guess my question is, like, what does that even look like? Like, do guys just get shut down? Because there's a team that won 56 games that can still exist if you come back with everybody healthy next year.
I think you look at the Warriors in a sense, that one gap year, right? You had where they ended up drafting Jonathan Kuminga. I think you're very similar to that with the Grizzlies. We're looking at, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., who are healthy. Jaren will be playing in the game versus New York, I would assume. But it is a back-to-back, so we'll get into that stuff, the game talk later. But you have those two guys who are ascending. With those two ascending, I think you have to say, we're going to go for it, because what that does is that allows them to be themselves, and that allows them to play up to their best abilities and possibly, kind of emerge as a different type of a player than just a 1B or a 2 or a 3 option. Like you can possibly have, 3 players that could score with the ball, be really good, if you include John Morant with that. And so I think it is a gap season now, but I don't think that all is lost. You have a lot of good players over there, but I think what you're going to see with the Grizzlies is, the trade deadline could be something that, is looked at. All in all, if they didn't do anything, I think you feel good about going into next year, really. So
they could quite literally do nothing at the deadline. Now, maybe there's like a smaller piece that gets moved. What's funny enough, in this post-Anunoby and more specifically this post-Emmanuel Quickley world for Knicks fans, we've started to look around for point guards, and right. we looked at Marcus Smart and whether or not he was a keeper in Memphis. I want to, if I could just ask the question, like, how do Grizzlies fans view Marcus Smart? Is he part of the long-term solution in Memphis, or could he potentially be had in a deal based off of what you know?
Yeah, I would say he's definitely up for sale. We'll say no, but he's available if the right, the right piece. But I would say he's under contract. I believe it's next 3 seasons. And so with that, you don't have to make a move. You can see how it all plays out. Anything you do is not for this year. And so it's really like, hey, yeah, he's available if you really want him, but we don't have to do anything. And we already know that expectations are low. And so at that point, it actually allows you a little bit better from just being a straight seller, like, hey, we have to do something. You're not in that mode anymore. I would say he's not the best fit next to Ja, but you need a vet. How do you get vets on a team? It is through Marcus Smart. But if you were to get rid of him, you have to feel that, because there's too many young guys on a team that want to be good. And so when you have a bench filled with people that, really have never won on a high level, never been on a winning team in the playoffs other than, this current team, you have to find vets. And so Marcus Smart is that vet. Derrick Rose is that vet. He's kind of a back, he's in the back. He's still there. He's in your locker room. but he's not able to put you, the same stuff that he once did, right, for New York. And so I will say that Marcus Smart is available, but I think your asking price, it's still pretty high with him.
They're not going to sell him off. It's not an asset. They're just looking to, which again goes to the point that this isn't a fire sale.
Exactly.
This is very much like a retool because so much went wrong. It's like your car's in the shop, but it's not totaled.
Exactly.
It's very much like, well, we're going to be able to drive this again, but for now we're going to be okay driving this rental for the rest of the season. And look, it's quite literally what Marcus Smart did for Boston all those years when he was a vet, while you had the Jason Tatums and the Jaylen Browns and what they were doing. And look, you mentioned Derrick Rose. The Knicks for a while, well, not really for a while because he wasn't here for a while, but when Taj Gibson got re-signed most recently for the Knicks, the thought was that because you lost Derrick Rose, there was a veteran presence missing in our locker room. And seeing what he's done in Memphis this year, it's gone about as expected on the court, but like the thought was that he'd be a veteran point guard next to Ja and just a presence in the locker room, like you were mentioning. And what we didn't realize was Taj was going to play minutes for the Knicks because Tibbs is obsessed with playing Taj Gibson. So unfortunately, Taj already got released by the Knicks, but we'll see where he eventually ends up. I guess my next question really goes to, I mean, as far as the future of the Grizzlies is concerned, and I guess it also has a little bit to do with the past because you brought up the Warriors and their stopgap year when everybody got hurt. But there was almost like some goodwill. I shouldn't say almost. There was goodwill built up because this is the team that had won 3 championships in 4 years. And I know that like the Grizzlies were on the ascend ever since Ja got drafted, between the play-in game that they won to get into the playoffs, and then you get the 2 seed the next 2 seasons. I guess my thought is my curiosity is about the front office in Memphis and how much goodwill they've built up, because like this team's going to get pretty expensive pretty soon with some of the younger guys needing to get paid. And I guess like my thought is like, how much patience have they earned with the fan base in Memphis?
I don't think Grizz Twitter is a real place. I think it's a place that you ends up being a lot of groupthink, and I think you see that with social media across the board. I think you do. I think if you take a step back and you actually see it from a different perspective, from a team perspective, from a city perspective, what this team means to the city is everything. And so if you take a step back and take a deep breath, no matter what happens, you have to have this team in the city. And so that picture, what I look at is, has the front office done a good job to put a competitive team on the court, to be a competitive team and honestly in the NBA? Yes. Have they drafted well? Yes. Have they also had their mistakes? Yes. But who hasn't? Mm-hmm. Like if you're in a relationship, you're never going to get married if you look at all the negatives, right? And if you start putting the pros and cons, you're like, I could talk myself in or out of it, right? But realistically, like, are you in love? Yeah, we in love. So like with the Grizzlies, I think these fans are a little crazy, as we all are, and that's fine. But you look at their drafting, they have just hit it out of the park left and right in so many areas. Even now, just signing Vince Williams to a decent contract, one of the highest of 2 ways ever. Like that's a big deal. So they've done a very good job. Yes, they had I think Zaire isn't the player you hope to get at a top 10 draft pick. Unfortunately, he's one of their highest draft picks outside of Ja and Jaren. But then if you look at Desmond Bane, you look at Santi Aldama, you look at now Vince Williams, who was 47th overall, I believe. There's a lot of people on this team that the front office has drafted well, and the coaching staff has done a very good job. Taylor Jenkins is about to be the all-time winningest coach, or the most wins for the Grizzlies, and that says a lot, especially from a team. But a lot of it does go back to Ja. But the team, the front office, everybody, I think, has a lot of goodwill from the fans in general, if you ask the right people.
Well, I mean, first of all, this has gone full therapy session, bringing up whether or not it's right to how married to a team you end up being. And I enjoy the introspection, I got to say. I will say, and that I think is where Knicks fans can relate a ton, because I'd argue we were in an abusive relationship for the longest time with this team, and yet we still kept giving them chances. And it's like, they got Melo. They drafted Porzingis. They're going to tank and get Zion, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving. And it's finally, we're in a stable relationship. And I think that's why the Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett trade was such a shakeup for a lot of people, because it was like we had the stability of you building through the draft and giving us young players to get attached to, and then you trade them both on New Year's Eve. And this Anunoby thing has worked out great, although they did just lose in Dallas last night. But I can understand, like, because of how good it's been, you're willing to accept some of the mistakes that have happened most recently too.
And it's not all because of like play on the court necessarily. Like, it is injuries too. Like, if it was a different team, like, hey, we've been healthy, we just aren't getting it done, then yes. But when you have so many injuries, so many issues that maybe are out of your control, I think that you kind of have to look at it and say, all right, it's not really your fault. You put the team that should be good. It's just, things happen.
I'll be as gentle as possible, but I hinted at it earlier. The what if of 2 years ago, how much do Grizzlies fans live that out? 1-1 going back to Golden State. And then like Ja has that game too, which was amazing down the stretch. And the one game 5 by like 100 points. So you could see what that team could do against the Warriors. But how much do Grizzlies fans play that out as far as like what could have been if you get by the Warriors in that round?
Yeah, I think you can look at it from two sides. I say, man, you had a chance to catch lightning in a bottle. Like, you don't get a chance all the time. You don't get to build a team like the Denver Nuggets have built now. Like, you just don't. But you do sometimes get a chance to be a winning team and catch lightning in a bottle and just go, way above expectations. And I think that's really where I feel there's a lot of people that say, it kind of hurt them because realistically you thought you were that good. And then the next year you didn't do as much because you didn't want to tinker with it too much. And really you kind of took a step back because of that lack of tinkering with maybe getting the right pieces when these guys were young, but also were cheaper. Now that they're all coming up big contracts, I think, some people think that you missed out, but man, that does, like, you can go all the way back to when Tony Allen got hurt in the playoffs that one time with his hamstring. And they literally tried to play him, and all he did, I think it was the Warriors, and they just let him shoot whenever he wanted to, just because he couldn't do anything anymore. So yes, we hate the Warriors.
Yeah,
that was your question.
No, that was very much like how much, like, what's the what if and how much you feel about the feeling. It sounds like is we hate the Warriors.
We hate the Warriors,
and on both sides, both bookends of the dynasty too, because that Tony Allen series you're talking about is the 2015 season when the Warriors won their first title and the Grizz were up 2-1 in that series. I liken what's happened in Memphis really this past decade to the Knicks in the 90s, where there was never a championship won, but there's such an affection for what the franchise accomplished during that time. Some of the happier memories. Well, you didn't win at all. You were still entertained. And, like you said, it's not always an on the court connection that's made. And we'll see, it's a stopgap. It's not like the run is over. Yes. Like John Morant is 23 years old and you have a lot of these kids still, entering into their prime. So we'll see what happens one day. So as far as this game on Saturday, obviously no Ja, no Marcus Smart. I should say we're recording this before the game against the Clippers, and I'm not going to assume anything, but we'll just say the Clippers have looked amazing over the last 2 months. And so the Knicks had a back-to-back against them where the Clippers were the second night after they were in Phoenix the night before. And the Clippers just ran them off the court in the second quarter. Like, it was not close. And so I'm obviously we'll see what happens in that game. But what should Knicks fans expect in this matchup against the Grizzlies? What can they expect as far as like we've seen multiple levels of teams at the bottom or on the other side of the play-in, that it's like there's teams that give you a good fight and a tough game, and then they beat Portland by 38 the other night. So, what can Knicks fans expect?
I'd say definitely a tough fought game. And that's going to be, I think what you're going to get with the Grizzlies MO, coming forward is I think you're seeing these young players really say, hey, the expectations are gone. Like, I don't have the pressure of, Ja's here. I can't make a big mistake. I can't do something stupid and where we potentially just lose the game. It's literally like, hey, we're probably going to lose. But if for some reason I can kind of play out of my mind and, Bane gets hot, Jaren, takes over being a bigger size guy against the Knicks, like, it really could get, a tough fought game where they could give it to the Knicks. Not in a sense of you ever blow them out. I don't think you blow out a Tibbs team. It's very tough. But I do think that you can have a knockdown, drag out fight. And I really do think if you're talking about the Clippers game, the Grizzlies struggle against athleticism. They do. And I'm not saying that the Clippers are, but they're kind of the sports car, right? Well, the big muscle car is the Knicks, and the ones that tried, through and through, they're going to just give it to you, and you just kind of like, all right, cool. Like they're that team, but we can hang because they're not going to just run away from us. So I think that's what you're going to get. The only thing I hate is it is a back-to-back. That makes me nervous of what you do. The Grizzlies are, from all accounts on the injury report, they're going to play as many people as possible. They only have 9. They're going to play as many people as possible against the Clippers. But how do you sit Bane and Jaren at home on a back-to-back? You don't have any other options. So the only thing is if there is a blowout on against the Clippers, then you're going to get a full force game out of Bane and Jaren. If not, then it could be, hey, we're going to hold them to 30 minutes and just see what happens.
The next thing I want to ask you, and I guess this is more of I do this every episode where I turn the pod over to my guest, and I basically want you to host for a little bit and get your thoughts on the Knicks and questions you have about the Knicks. And a little behind the scenes, I was told there's trivia. So if you want to bring up your Knicks trivia right now, I'd actually be very excited because it's literally the thing I live for is seeing how well I do with trivia. That's one of the things that I've become known for at Knicks Film School is I remember these obscure things of like, how do you remember that random game from 2002? So I'm ready to test myself and see what you got for me.
Well, this could get really good because I have 3 different tiers of my question of like, hey, if you get it right, I might ask and dig in a little bit more. I'm going to go off the very top. But at Grizz and I, when we do our second segment, as we always start right after our first set of commercials, is we just ask Grizz trivia. And my co-host is a complete idiot that has no idea about trivia or the history of the Grizzlies. Okay. But he is the entertainer on the show. But I ask him these questions, and most of the time he gets lucky. Weirdly enough, do you know this? And this is not Knicks Grizzlies. Whenever they were receiving, when the Vancouver Grizzlies were getting their franchise, they wanted to name the team the Vancouver what? Do you know?
I don't know.
The Vancouver Mounties.
Ooh. That's a Canada thing, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so somebody said, no, we can't do the Mounties. So they became the Grizzlies. Anyway, but this is Knicks trivia. So, Andrew, you're on the phone.
Okay.
Right. So in the draft, this is not people that they trade away, not people that they draft and trade, but actually players that end up playing for the actual team out of the draft all time. What is the college player that has been drafted the most? As in, like, what college have they drafted the most players from?
First guess is Kentucky.
Wow, you're close.
Okay. So I obviously, okay.
Kentucky is second.
Quickly and Kevin Knox were recent.
And this is all time. So this school, all their players are from 1949 to 2000. The most recent one was 2000. So that's going to go back a little bit.
Oh, so it's a 2000 draft pick. In 2000, they drafted. That's the Lampe draft. So he drafted 30 because the league only had 29 teams. I'm blanking on who they took in the first round though.
So I'm showing that in 2000, the second round, pick 39 was a LeVar Postel.
LeVar Postel, yes.
Yeah, that guy.
And where'd he go?
St. John's.
So is St. John's really the school they've drafted the most from, or is that not the answer? 15 draft picks. That is the most. St. John's. You know what's funny about that? So there's actually a legendary draft pick they didn't make that went to St. John's. So really? I believe it's either the year before, 2 years before, famously Meta World Peace, aka Ron Artest, went to St. John's, and the Knicks had the 15th pick, and Artest is sitting there, had just had like a great run during the Big East tournament and the NCAA tournament, and like local kid, it was like, this is perfect. You add him to the mix, and they took Frederick Weiss with the 15th pick. It was like a 7-footer overseas. The Olympics happened. Now I know it's definitely 98 because the Olympics happened right after that. And you know that iconic clip of Vince Carter dunking over somebody? That was Frederick Weiss, who after that never came to the NBA. He's like, this is what happens over there. And then obviously our test went the next pick, and obviously his career went a certain way. But a lot of Knicks fans look at that pick as, you know, why a big what if of maybe he ends up in New York and it's a little different. So
that's not good. I didn't know that. I was looking through here and I'm seeing the normal schools that you would expect. And I start seeing them and all of a sudden I see some random schools. And then I come down to St. John's and I'm like, God, like it was the whole, my Excel, list that I have. I was like, God, dog, I just kept going. It was like 15, but it was a lot through 49 to 2000. And because of that, I have another question. So you did name the other school that has drafted 3 players since 2000. Who is the other school that has had 3 players drafted from?
So I think it's not Kentucky?
It is Kentucky is one.
So
There's
it's
another
Emmanuel
school that
Quickly.
has 3.
Oh, so I don't name the 3 players. So it's another school.
Sorry. Another school.
Channing Frye went to Arizona. David Lee went to Florida.
That's correct.
Ooh. I'll pass. Damn. I feel bad now that I feel like I'm good at trivia and that I don't know colleges. What's the answer?
You were on it. Channing Frye, Arizona.
It is Arizona. Okay. So who are the other Arizona kids?
They had Jordan Hill, Channing Frye, and Ali Karadeniz. Sure.
Oh, so I forgot that Jordan Hill went to Arizona, but that's another famous draft because the pick before Jordan Hill was Steph Curry and the pick after Jordan Hill was DeMar DeRozan. So
that's what I was looking at the draft, and I thought it was impressive. This team, I like the New York Knicks, and I think they're very good. They're Tibbs' style, and I think that's why you go out and get OG and actually add him into this. I do have a question. So with the Knicks is you have Jalen Brunson, who's your main scorer. I would assume it's Randall, but who's your next guy that is your big scorer on this team?
It's absolutely Julius Randle. So we're talking 2-time All-NBA. We'll see what happens with the All-Star voting, but maybe headed to a 3rd All-Star team, which the company he'd be in as far as the Knicks is concerned this century of guys that have been to 3 All-Star teams. It's Carmelo Anthony, and that's the end of the list. So that's the company that Randall could potentially find himself in if he makes the All-Star team. I do think that there is a wait and see approach with Knicks fans of what version of him we get in the playoffs, but it honestly can sometimes be 1 and 1A when it comes to main scorers between Brunson and Randall.
So I know there has been a lot of slander for Randall within the Knicks fan base, and a lot of it was last year, but what does he need next to him to be the best version of himself?
So honestly, spacing, which is why the Anunoby trade was so, my goodness, how it's fit like a glove. And this has been a debate amongst some Knicks fans. Even in our circle, of how miscast RJ Barrett might have been to be like the spacing wing in New York. He's off to a good start in Toronto, and he's actually playmaking, which that had started to fall. It's a tough thing with RJ is because he's the elite thing that he was good at is getting downhill and getting to the rim. He just wasn't accurate enough to demand so many paint touches. And first 6 games of the year, he was distributing out of his paint touches and he was creating looks in the wing and in the corners. And then he had some migraines and then came back, and that part of his game just disappeared. Now he's gone to Toronto and he's doing it again, and he's also shooting like 50% from 3. I am curious what happens with RJ when the shots stop falling. And with Randall, like so far, he has like DiVincenzo in one corner where he's elite from, and Anunoby in another corner where he's elite from. He can have some tunnel vision at times, but they've created a lot of open looks with that type of spacing. And yeah, as far as what he needs, as far as what's around him, I think, honestly, I also think, weirdly enough, the Mitchell Robinson injury that just happened kind of cleared out the paint a little bit, because Hartenstein could come up to the elbow or even the 3-point line, and you can run plays through him from there, which then like the rim's wide open. So as far as schematically, that's what I'd say. There is also a hint of, and look, I'm trying to be as respectful as possible to him, but just don't be a pumpkin in the playoffs. Like it's just that he has the tendency at times to just not look the way he does in the regular season. And while I give him a pass for last year because of the injury and 2 years ago because it was 1-on-5 out there, I don't think another playoffs like that, I don't think he's going to have any excuses with the fan base. And it stinks too, because as I mentioned, he's climbing up leaderboards amongst the fan base that just only Melo really exists this century. It's him and Carmelo Anthony at the top of most of them.
No, Randall has been great, and I think he does need to be the creator in a sense. And I know Brunson has been that, but I think they can play off each other, like you were saying. Because you hinted on that last thing, I didn't want to ask this, but now I have to. Now,
go ahead.
I want to know your Mount Rushmore for New York Knicks.
Oh my! Wow. So it's funny. I sent you the rundown ahead of time. I'm going to ask your Mount Rushmore. You turned it on me. I appreciate. I very much do appreciate it because no one ever asks me that question. My Knicks are Carmelo Anthony. Obviously, the jersey behind me is he's going to end up on there. Carmelo Anthony, Latrell Sprewell.
Wow.
Allen Houston, Patrick Ewing.
Wow. I like that.
Yeah. With an honorable mention, if I was allowed to put a fifth person up there, to Jamal Crawford. But Jamal Crawford
over Starks.
So my first memory of the Knicks is 97. So that was Starks getting moved to the bench. Like he was the sixth man of the year that year. The next 2 years later, he's traded for Sprewell. I was a Michael Jordan fan at the time. And so my first real year being a Knicks fan was 99 without Starks and with Sprewell. So I don't have anything against John Starks. I just didn't ever really root for him when he was on my basketball team. The Jamal Crawford of it all is I believe I was 19 when he was in New York, and I learned how to drive, and it was like he would always stop for autographs, and I always appreciated that. But I was like, one of the first things I was able to do was like, oh, you got your license? Great. We're going to the Garden. We're going to watch the Mets. We're going to watch. What's the interesting thing is that we used to have to go to Jersey to watch the Nets when they were there. And it was whatever guys would stop for autographs grew in our hearts. So I have a box at my parents' house in Long Island of like ticket stubs that just have Jamal Crawford's name on him because he would be the only one that would stop after games. So
that's awesome. I've never thought of Jamal Crawford. So that was a great.
It's so obscure. Believe me, it's very specific to me. He's like 13th as far as Knicks fans that may ever, when you ask them this question, it's that specific memory that was built that I waited after games and you were the one person that would actually stop and sign all of our ticket stubs. So I appreciate that. It's now my turn to turn it back on you.
Yes.
And we'll wrap up by asking you the Mount Rushmore of Grizzlies rivals. So I told you that I like to find out who the dates that you circle on the calendar, who the teams you look forward to playing, who the rivalries that are built up over the years. So go right ahead, Daniel. Who are the Mount Rushmore of Grizzlies rivals?
I think there is one that stands alone higher than everybody else, and that is the Warriors. I think that's understood at this point. Even though they don't say it's a rivalry, it is what it is. I don't care.
But from your perspective, it absolutely.
I love it.
The number one team you circle.
Yeah, you have to go with the Lakers next because of the playoff matchups, but also a lot of the beef that's happened. Desmond Bane, I don't know how much you know about Desmond Bane, but the dude is a dog. Like that dude, if you have any kind of issue and you need somebody to always back you, one, his arms are kind of bigger than most. But second, like he's going to step up, whether, it is to AD, and AD's, much bigger than he is. But the I guess the games between them have always been great. I guess the trash talking has always been great. So there has to be the Lakers there as well. These next ones were a little different for different reasonings, but the Pelicans are one of mine. I think a lot of, the Grizzlies fan base is because of, you do have the Zion, the Ja stuff. They are really close. A lot of fans, will take that drive down. I think it's 6 hours away and go to those away games that are down in New Orleans. And so that's always a good time. Plus, dude, CJ McCollum kills us. And so it's always just in a bane of our existence. And then the last one would be the Minnesota Timberwolves. And not as much this year, but in the years past is because that fan base is, rabid, like when it comes to their home games. And on Twitter, on social media, we kind of go back and forth in a healthy way. But the fact that the teams go at it, Anthony Edwards loves playing in Memphis. His girlfriend is from Memphis, I do believe. And so that helps. So he tries to show out, and him and Ja, get along. So I always look at the young guys, and it is, the Zion, the Anthony Edwards, and then you have the old heads of Steph and Clay, who wants to count all his rings every time, and then LeBron and AD. So that's my four.
So 2 things. First of all, as far as the Timberwolves are concerned, how complicated has it been watching Mike Conley in a Timberwolves uniform?
He's one of the ones that gets a pass.
Okay.
He left on good terms. And I'd say all the core 4 that were there, they all left on good terms in a sense. But yeah, he gets a pass. Like, he's always celebrated. He will forever be celebrated. He'll end up doing, some stuff back here in Memphis, once he's done. It's weird. The connection of those core 4 and Memphis, you don't realize how really strong it is and how much of a bond it is. But it's bigger than basketball. If I had to just make a cliche statement, it really is.
And then the thing that's always fascinated me when I ask people this question is how few division rivals show up. And especially when I ask outside of my own division, because if you ask a lot of Knicks fans, obviously Brooklyn, because there's a second team in the city, gets brought up. The Celtics because of New York, Boston, the Sixers because of New York, Philly. And honestly, because of this trade, now there's a New York, Toronto aspect that has been created. I would include Miami or Indiana because of the playoff battles that have happened between those teams over the years. But I recognize that for most Knicks fans, it's the locality that matters. And you named one division team. So I'm curious, has there ever been anything with the Grizzlies with another division rival? I know they played the Spurs a couple times in the playoffs, so maybe it might be them, right?
Well, to be a rival, you have to actually beat them.
Fair. That's very fair. Yeah.
And honestly, we were getting smoked by them, except for that one year when the Grizzlies did play well against them. It's Pop is so respected that, especially in the, Grizzlies fan base, that he's so respected that you kind of just say, hey, he's our daddy in a sense. Like, he is that guy. And, if we're good, it is what it is, but it's not a rivalry. It never has had, there's got to be something there, but I would say I was looking at, Dallas kicks our brains in every single time we play. And Luka is just Luka magic. He always plays well against us. So it's hard to do that. And the other ones, it's not really, there's nothing there. I need substance. I need some kind of trash talking to be a rival. I need something there to say, hey, they're both going at it. When I go down, I look at the different schedule, and I do every single year. I circle the games that I want to make sure that I do the post game show on. So whatever day it is, I don't want to miss those. And so those are my 4 teams. When I start looking at them, like, those are the ones I circled. Those are the 4 teams I have to put down.
I love that you literally have the version of the question I'm asking. Who are the teams you circle on the calendar? Oh, wow. It's actually being applied what I'm asking.
Yes,
so it was perfect that I asked you this question, Daniel. Well, I've enjoyed our conversation, man. It was great to meet you. Appreciate you talking to my audience a little bit more about what's going down in Memphis. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks know where you could they can find you and all your stuff.
Yeah, you can find me. I'm obviously at Daniel Greer on Twitter. It's simple, but nobody cares about me. But the show is at Grizz 901 Podcast. We do live post-game shows after every game, similar to what y'all do as well. And so our biggest thing is we're not going to be the smartest people in the room, but we can be really funny. But we try to educate and kind of entertain you as well. And so we have a good group that follows us. And so as soon as the buzzer sounds, we always go live, and we have a good time with it. And so it's always fun here in the Bluff City. We're with Bluff City Media, trying to branch out and grow and be a little bit bigger of a piece in Memphis within the media department. But yeah, if you're ever hopping on and you say, hey, you know what? I can't find any content. I need something to do. If the Grizzlies are over, we're definitely going to be on.
Listen, the big thing I like to tell people is like the Knicks Film School bump, if we can, whether it's like a 5-star rating on iTunes or even just invading your comment section after a game. I will personally, obviously, watch us, Knicks Film School faithful, but head on over to Grizz 901 after the game on Saturday. Even if it was just a good game, and thanks for coming on. Let's spread the love if we possibly can. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me.
For sure.